I would like to call this meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order on Wednesday, November 21st, 2018, 7 o'clock p.m. The current time is about 7:08. Are we okay to go, Matt? Awesome. May I please have confirmation of agenda? Are there any additional agenda items, councillors?
I would like to remove agenda item 9.2, please.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Are there any additions from administration? All right, could I please have a motion? Oh, Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in number 12, under questions between councillors, or it could be under, come under reaction to bylaws, but it is a statement and it is regarding the cemetery bylaw.
Ms. Watsky, where would that best be placed?
Your Worship, it would be under 12.1.
May I please have a motion to accept the agenda as amended? Councillor Corbeil?
I move to accept the agenda as amended.
All in favor? And that is carried. We have no presentations or recognitions today. We do have one delegation for number 4, and we're on 4.1. I'd like to welcome Waste Management up, and who do we have presenting today?
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Chris LeMace. I'm the Business Development Manager for Waste Management.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for having us in tonight. I've also got Jordan Lister, our District Manager for the region, with me. I think you know Jordan. And I've got Cody Huckstead, who's our Local Operations Manager as well. Excuse me. Jordan gave me his cold, I think. So just wanted to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about our business and the services that we provide here in Strathmore. So we'll talk a little bit about waste management. We'll talk a little bit about the current services and the operations here. We'll talk about your green card program and the results here to date. Talk about some of the key areas of focus in our business. And then we want to show you a little bit about what's happening at the composting facility. And then, of course, at the end, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have. So Waste Management is the leading environmental service provider in North America. On the screen here, you see some photos of Waste Management here in Strathmore. Of course, there'll be some familiar faces in the photos there. We offer a full suite of comprehensive environmental solutions. We process about 3.8 million tons of source-separated organic materials annually at over 40 composting facilities. We are the largest recycler in North America, and we manage 10.76 million tons of recycling in 2017. And I'll turn it over to Jordan to talk about the current programs and services here for the town.
Your Worship, there is a 10-minute time limit.
So just so you know, just after around 9 minutes, I'll just let you know that just to wrap it up. But thank you very much.
All right, well, I'll try and speak a little more quickly. Shorter version, okay. So I'll talk about 3 things here. One is our current services we provide. Secondly is the green cart results year to date. And the third thing is our key focus with the compost facility. So our services we provide in Strathmore, our curbside black cart program, which started in January of this year. Secondly is our green cart program with the organics, which launched in June. Our organics processing facility, recycling drop-off center, as well as our heavy item garbage pickup, and then our subscription recycle curbside pickup in town here. So we'll go on to the next slide. So the green bar represents the residual waste tonnage collected curbside by month so far in 2018. The yellow bar represents the organics tonnage collected curbside by month. In 2017, the total residual waste collected curbside was 2,734 metric tons. For comparison, since the launch of the Green Cart program in June, year-to-date, we have collected 1,912 metric tons of residual waste compared to 2,343 over the same period in 2017. Since the June launch and through the end of October, we have collected 473 metric tons of organics through the Green Cart program. We collected a total of 903 metric tons of residual waste through the curbside program during this period. So overall, good results on what we've collected for organics and the participation from the residents. So we'll move on to the compost facility and our key focus areas. So additional equipment has been brought in this year, and our operating hours at the compost facility have been extended in order to decrease volume of materials on site. Beginning the week of October 29th, we have diverted feedstock that we think may have been a concern for our processing abilities. We have purchased larger blower equipment to upgrade our air systems. 2 of these units currently are operational. Beginning the week of November 19th, so this week, we have diverted approximately 90% of the inbound feedstock, not including the towns, in order to focus our resources on the initiatives described here. This will help us reduce the amount of material on site over the next 3 to 6 weeks, weather dependent, of course. We are investigating the site's electrical service and whether it can support a more efficient aeration system. We are evaluating additional equipment to shred mixed feedstocks, which will result in a more homogeneous material, which in turn will optimize the composting process. We have moved fresh feedstock into the active composting piles and have added a bio cover layer over top of the composting to help mitigate potential odors. Our corporate-based organics recycling experts have been actively engaged, including on-site work this week, assisting us with enhancing our facility, including equipment, infrastructure, and operating practices. At this point, I'll turn it over to Cody just to describe some of the photos you see here.
Hello. So in this picture, I guess I'm just showing you in the last month. The next one I'll show a little better, where we brought in more equipment. It's showing you kind of the piles here. Can we go to the next slide? Perfect. And then this is showing here where we've started pulling piles, screening. The next one, again, is even the better one. So here's the site layout there. So everything on this end, you can see the 2 screeners. So we brought in another screener as we've now just focusing on getting the backlog. We have trucks moving out the finished compost as we speak every day. The key focus is to get our piles down. We're going to be decreasing 50% on our pile sizes, and all this material in this corner within 3 to 4 weeks will be all finished and moved off site. So it's just giving you kind of a breakdown of where we're at this point from a month ago. Nothing that I can really in there.
Okay. Well, we'd be happy to take your questions, and we'll do our best to answer. It was quicker than I thought. These guys are very efficient. Bring the operations guys, and they just keep it rolling.
So, my question would be, do you believe that the feedstock?
Thanks, guys.
Sorry, I'll just turn on my microphone. Do you believe that having the feedstock in the compost piles contributed to the extra smell that we were experiencing in Strathmore?
So I guess, yeah, so sorry, so I guess when we say feedstock, so that's our food waste. So we've, as of yesterday, 90% has been diverted away from the site. So we are all focused on getting the site where we need it to be so that we can mitigate all that in the next, like I say, 3 to 4 weeks is what I'm looking at to get all that out of there, bring our pile size down. So I guess that's where we're saying is we are not bringing any inbound stuff back.
Maybe the feedstock from October.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
clarify. We actually made 2 decisions.
Yeah,
The first
sorry.
was to redirect one specific feedstock or one specific material. So that was the first decision. And then more recently, just this week, as Jordan explained, we made the second decision, which was to divert practically all of the inbound tons, aside from the town of Strathmore's and 1 others, is really just to really reduce the amount of inbound material while the operations team works on what Jordan described, which is increasing our throughput and being able to move more of the finished material off-site And in my words, just kind of create a little more elbow room on site so that we can put in place a lot of the measures that Jordan described. And-
What are you finding in terms of the products that people are putting in their compost bins? Are they in compliance with the education material that we sent out, or is that also contributing to contamination?
Of what I've seen, like we've seen a huge participation with Strathmore. Like I would say I was pretty shocked with the amounts that everybody was diverting. Obviously, one of the things I'm doing little pamphlets to help teach everybody, even on my tours and the kids and stuff, is the grocery bags and stuff. Like we're still seeing lots of grocery bags. So I think there's just more education that needs to be brought. People still think that the grocery bags can go in there and not compost, or they're not using compostable bags. So there's, I'm not saying it's just Strathmore, it's everybody's working on it as a whole,
The
yeah.
content is a bit of a challenge.
If you are to send me some of that information, so we can fan out through our communications department, and then also there's some counselors and we can put that on our
Yeah, I wanted
social
to kind of
media.
break it down as maybe giving more options of what can and what not to go in there. That's kind of the biggest part of it.
Thank you very much. Counselor Sobel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation, gentlemen. If I understand this correctly, 3 to 4 weeks, there's an assumption that whatever odors that are unpleasant, that our community's experiencing, should be done with. Is that a fair statement?
Yes,
Yes.
that's exactly what I'm saying. So we're not bringing any product, like I said, we're diverting it right now so that I can just focus on getting it where it needs to be.
Okay.
So,
But right now, we are taking all of Strathmore's
Yes.
compostable material and keeping it on site.
Yes.
And we'll continue to take the town's
Yes.
compost and keep it on site, or organics, yeah.
Is your plan to gradually begin taking outside composting material once you're set up for that?
exactly.
Yes, yeah, we'd like to. There's a big demand for this service.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we've seen over the last 6 months or so is the demand for the service kind of got us to a point where we weren't quite keeping up with the process or the operations. So that's
Right.
really what we're doing now, is getting caught up on the operations and the process so that we can, be sure we've got the right process rate, if you will. And then, yes, we would like to bring those other materials back in. We see a real need for it in the region. Obviously, the town of Strathmore's program is kind of that's the piece that's still going into the site today, as well as one other community. But the commercial materials that are coming from the regional area, there's still a big demand for that, or a big need for that service as well.
So I guess, yeah, we're stepping back, looking at it, gonna start organizing the whole space and utilizing, so like I say, you can kind of see in the pictures, maybe if you guys wanna come on a tour, definitely like sooner now, and come maybe for another one in 4 weeks, and I'll show you physically with your eyes the difference that will be in 4 weeks.
And I think a big part of working with Cody and our compost expert is to determine the site's capacity.
Right.
Yes.
And what our ability to process what amount.
Okay.
So we're working on that.
So obviously, there were some miscalculations in that regard, and that's being looked at and rectified, and I have some faith in what you folks are doing, but I do want to emphasize one thing, that our community wants to be famous and popular for a whole bunch of things, but that odor is not one of them. It has really created a lot of problems for this council, our administration, and for a lot of people. And I know you guys know that, but
Right.
I want to emphasize the fact that we can't allow that to continue on. That's not, we're in the throes of trying to advertise our community as a place where everybody can enjoy life, and that's not doing it. So I mean, I'm inundated with angry people about this, and I know you've got that message through our administration, because I've passed it on to our administration. I know it's gone forth. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. I have one other request, but in regards to that, I'm trusting you folks to look after this issue. It has to be dealt with. This is not a maybe. This has to be dealt with. And the last question I'd have, or request I'd have, that was a great slideshow that you got. Is there any chance that can be forwarded to our CEO or our
Yep,
administration?
we will definitely do
and
that.
they can get it over to us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming, guys. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, and Councillor Sobel, thank you for your comments, and thank you for your patience and support as we work through this.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, guys, for coming. It was a great presentation, very informative. I'm really happy with how much, I believe, waste we've kind of diverted from landfills. That's a very positive step in such a short amount of time. I really look forward to more with that. And yes, if we can get it all under control in 4 weeks, then 4 weeks isn't as long as we've kind of gone through it anyway. So positive steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I definitely reflect my fellow councillors' concerns, and I find it concerning that we entered into this compost arrangement without knowing the capacity. And it's something that I don't think, necessarily would have happened before, but it has, as Councillor Sobel mentioned, it has caused issues for this council, but more importantly, it has seriously compromised quality of life for our people, to the point that when you live on the south side of the community, they're referring to it as Wheezy Wednesdays, and because that's when it's the worst. And it really has led to a degradation of people's quality of life to an extraordinary degree, and worried about moving into the community. The letters that we've received, I don't know if they've been passed on to you, but people's concerns have been well taken by this council, and we have no appetite left for this.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I would just like to conclude by echoing Councillor Peterson's comments. We definitely appreciate your diligence and working with us on eliminating the odor that comes with, doing something very good for the environment. And I implore you to come back if this is not working, and if you see that you need to go in another direction, please come back and let us know. We are here to support you, and we want to work together, and we want to really just make this community, part of our sustainability platform is keeping care of the environment and our economic development going forward. We want people to come here and be proud. So thank you for taking care of our waste and for everything that you've done in putting together this presentation for today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your supportive comments. This partnership is really important to waste management, so you're going to get our best work. That's what we intend to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we have the regular council meeting minutes for November 7th, 2018 on page 4 of your agenda package. May I have a motion to adopt those minutes, please? Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I'd move the regular council meeting minutes for November 7th, 2018, and I have one comment following that. A question?
Can we vote on the?
No. I have a question first.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Just to administration, referencing on page 8 and again on page 13 on the next set of minutes, I just note in under section 10 on page 8, 10.1, the language there. I know, Ms. Swatsky, that you have not made an error when it says that Councillor Peterson declared an interest. I think you meant an interest. Would our public necessarily understand that to be a conflict of interest? Which it is, because I declared a conflict of interest. But I know that this is the way it's often stated in minutes, but I don't know that it's best served, the public is best served.
Your Worship, we definitely can change the verbiage there, for sure, to conflict of interest, I'm understanding. Yeah, that's not a problem.
It appears again, just for information, Your Worship, on page 13. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Peterson, are you prepared to make a motion with those amendments, friendly amendments?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. May I also have a motion to adopt the public hearing minutes for November 7th, 2018? Those are on page 12 of your agenda package. Councillor Peterson again?
It is the same issue, Your Worship, but I also have another question. I know that this body has had conversations about voting in absentia, once you've been absent during a meeting, can you vote on the minutes of the meeting? And it's been ascertained that you absolutely not just can, but you must. Is that the same when I have absented myself from a public hearing, you still vote on it, on the minutes of that?
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
So we have changes on page 13.
Yes, so I would move the minutes of the public hearing of November 7th as amended, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. All in favor? And that is carried. We have no tabled items for today. Under 7.1, items from administration, request for decision, amend council remuneration policy. I have a little trout mumble. Amend council remuneration policy.
Just the number, just give the number.
Just page 16, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration is bringing this policy back to council. Council has seen this policy at their committee of the whole meeting, which was held last week. There's a number of changes recommended to the policy that council has discussed, including a change to council's mayor and council wages to offset the 1/3 tax-free benefit that is being taken away from council. There's also changes in regard to the amount of per diem that council can claim. And there is also a recommendation that council conduct a review of the remuneration by a third party. A couple of other changes were put into the policy that were discussed at the committee of the whole meeting, including some clarification regarding the purchase of alcohol on town business. That's in section 7.5 and 7.6. And there's also some clarification in regard to mileage expenses, as was discussed at the committee of the whole meeting. So at this time, council is recommending that council adopt the policy.
Councillor Montgomery,
I'm ready with a motion.
go ahead.
I will move that we approve policy 1806 as presented with the following amendments. Number 1 would be a revision of the definition of base salary. Number 2 would be a revision of section 5.1 to accept use of per diems for council work not covered under base salary definition. And number 3, to revise Schedule A to allow for incremental use of per diem budget up to the daily max rate. And further, that council instruct the remuneration task force to engage a third party to review comparable municipal remuneration rates and provide information regarding council remuneration to the task force, and to report back to council on or before the June committee of the whole meeting with recommendations based on the information collected.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Montgomery. There's been much discussion on this with administration and council. Pardon me, Ms. Sawatsky, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just that, I think it's important that council mention that there is a written motion in front of them, so that it goes on record as it is written on the paper, please.
Do you want me to mention that? So the amendments that I'm referring to are on the piece of paper provided to council at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, councillors? Councillor Sobel?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as you properly noted, this is, I think a complicated issue and an issue that there's a variety of opinions on. I can't support the motion either as stated by administration or as provided by Councillor Montgomery, because I think there's still a lot of work left on this. I think a more in-depth discussion and a gathering of opinions from the task force that's been put together for this purpose has to happen before we're at a point where we're going to do some voting. My personal view is that we should vote tonight on the fact that on the issue of 1/3 tax-free benefit. I think that's a fair issue to deal with, based on the fact that that this was a This was part of our salary when we took office and has been removed by the federal government. If this motion fails, as presented by Councillor Montgomery, my motion would be that we put this matter off. And I really don't think there's any rush on this. I don't see any reason why this can't go into January or February of next year. I think we're rushing this issue, and I think there's just, I think we're quite a ways apart, this council is, in regards to what should be done and what can be done, and to have a closer look at the finances. I just don't see the reason to rush into this. If I had my way, the effect on the budget would be extremely minimal, and the biggest part will be the one-third tax-free budget. So those are my comments, and I encourage council to consider putting this matter off for further consideration. Thank you.
Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Montgomery, for the motion that's been presented. I just want to make sure that we inform the public that the only real changes that we're making are to the one-third portion of our salary that we will be losing in January. The second one is, the main portion is to our daily per diems, which are, as we've presented a few times before, speak to the diversity of our council. Some of us work full-time, some of us have small children. We are impaired, as to say, with our abilities to go out in public during the day because of certain impairments that we have as a council. Some of us work, some of us have children, some of us can't get away. And our ability to lose income is an impairment on our part. So what we are trying to amend is the fact that we won't be losing money from other jobs or our family, take away from our families' income. The other thing that hasn't been brought forward, and I'm not quite sure if it's in here and I've missed it, is when this will take place or will be enforced.
This part is intended to be go forward only.
All of it.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have a separate discussion about the other part.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cox? Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I just have some questions, and some of them are for administration and some are for my fellow councillors. The first thing is, Councillor Sobel noted that he believes that there's not a rush to do this. But I'm not sure from my fellow councillors and some of the new tasks that they've taken on that this might not be, that some of our council in new roles are accruing huge amounts of costs because of assignments to their current workload, in addition to what they had before. I'd like to hear from and also we have a very different council this year, as Councillor Cox said, and I think that working to remove all kinds of barriers to make sure that everybody has an equal and opportunity to sit behind this table would be a good one. From administration, with the changes to the amendments, and I'm prepared to take a brief recess for you to do the calculations, but I would want to know what the budget impact is overall. And I know that you did some work on that before. I think you have it fairly close. So I would be prepared to, with my council's permission, to move a brief recess while we got that information. Is that okay, Your Worship?
Do you have access to that information, Mr. Thackeray, or do you have to access it and need a few minutes? So we'll take a brief recess?
if council wanted to go on and continue,
The
discussion
discussion?
in terms of,
Okay, I would
Of-
be
of-
prepared for that.
Thank
So
you.
I would just like to say that I really commend Councillor Montgomery for 6 months or more of looking at other communities that are not only the same in terms of population, but also growth. And so I think that what we're looking at here is a new council that has a new, fresh outlook and is really eager to serve the public. And I can say in my own specific instance, even this week, I've already put in well over 20 hours into my job as deputy mayor. And that is, of course, part of my job, but we haven't even addressed that part in this remuneration. We're only talking about the additional committee meetings that we're going to, the opportunity for professional development, and we're really taking a budget that is already there and adding $1,000 to it so that we can access it rather than through conference by going to a conference or going to, using it for travel, we are looking at using it for per diem. So it's just kind of changing how we're going to be accessing the money. And I am for this. I respectfully disagree with Councillor Sobel that this needs to be put off any longer, partly because I have not been able to, been compensated for 5 days that I've spent doing council work, and it's starting to add up. So just on that, I'd like to ask James Thackeray, are you able to provide Councillor Peterson with that information? Councillor Peterson?
so the other thing I'd like to say in response to the amendment is that under the remuneration, now I'm doing it, that to engage a third party, I'm not sure that that's necessary. I think that the current committee, that was working didn't have the time to actually do their job, and that's something that could be reconsidered. The other thing, I think that I was the one who made the status quo motion during the last council, and I think it's my life experience, my background, unfortunately my age, that lends itself to a different perspective on how we function as a council. But I have received an education from the new members of this council as regarding emerging responsibilities. Having said that, other than the 1/3 tax, which was not a condition when we were elected, I think that whether or not this is passed, it still is in the purview of individual councillors to spend or not to spend.
Yes.
And so that is something then that gives the community the capacity to closely examine performance of their elected officials and make judgments relevant to the service that they get. And in having said that, I think it's absolutely critical that we have that council report card that we talked about earlier being published on a monthly basis on our website. That's my last question to administration as to when that will happen.
Your Worship, I can answer that. We're in the process of posting it right now. So it will be up within a few days.
That's perfect. So then the only question remaining, for the remaining councillors is that whole idea whether or not there is emerging issues that would require this motion to be passed right away as opposed to later. I've heard from Councillor Bauer, but if there are emerging issues relevant to this, I would like to know. And like I said, I can also acknowledge that I made a promise in that election to the constituents. I feel obligated to maintain that, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that no current council has the right to dictate to an existing council. So I can monitor my promises, but don't have to control yours. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. And we have made recommendations as a council that our administration post our monthly spending, and that will be coming forward really soon. And so the public, we're trying to present a very transparent process with everyone out there, knowing exactly what we're doing if we're spending your dollars on professional development or going to meetings, and how we're informing ourselves to make our jobs better and to make us better at our jobs. Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to speak to Councillor Peterson's question whether or not there's urgency. I do want to point out that we have operated as a council for over a year now. And so not that there is, in my view, a specific urgency, but I do believe that we have had a year has gone by and we have felt it all in some way. And therefore, I think that there is no need to put it off any longer.
Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's just worth pointing out, like as a member of the task force, that the task force's work will be ongoing, and this is by no means kind of a final draft of the policy, and there will be other changes that will be forthcoming. And with regards to the Councillor Peterson's point about the third party, we feel it's just a prudent decision to get an unbiased kind of take on the situation, just to ensure that we aren't kind of overlooking or focusing on one aspect or overlooking something else that might be important and worth considering. And the task force will be, as I said, continuing its work, and will be coming back in the new year. And so I recommend not holding off until the task force has completed its work, as that likely won't be wrapped up in the immediate future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Mr. Thackeray, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. So the question, so I'm clear, is what is the budget impact of the proposed policy and the amendments thereto? So what I said, the budget impact would be, as proposed, is $5,000 per council member plus benefits, so roughly $40,000. For the mayor, the budget impact would be $9,000 plus benefits, with a budget impact of approximately $10,000. So that's roughly, in total, it's roughly $50,000 plus the proposed amendments brought forward by Councillor Montgomery to date would be another $1,000 per member of council, so about $57,000, give or take, depending on how much it's used. But that would be a ballpark estimate.
That'd be the maximum.
That would be the cap, that would be the ballpark. That's inclusive of the 1/3 adjustment, because the tax folks are saying that politicians are not allowed to accept the 1/3 tax exemption anymore. So this really is a wash for, as far as base salary is concerned.
So that's the total increase in the budget from what it currently is at to pass these amendments.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Thackeray. Would anyone like to respond to that? Councillor Peterson?
So just to recap, the $50,000 is on the 1/3 exemption. That is the cost on the 1/3 exemption.
Plus the administration changes.
If I may, through the chair? That's
please.
inclusive of what was the original proposed cap for the per diem, so that was inclusive of that.
Can you separate that out for us?
Yes, well, it was $3,000 per council member.
That's the 1/3 tax exemption.
So that was the cap on the per diem.
The cap on the per diem was 3,000 addition.
Yes, so it's an inclusive number, it's about $5,000 per council member. It might be 6,000 if you include your proposed cap of a $4,000 cap for per diems.
Councillor Peterson?
No, that's fine, Your Worship.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call the question. We are voting on the motion with amendments by Councillor Montgomery. Yes, Councillor Peterson.
How much will engaging a third party cost?
Do we know that, Mr. Thackeray?
So I don't have an exact number, but it's not expensive because we would be engaging through AMSC, Alberta Municipal Services Corp. So we already pay for, we're already a member of AMSC, so it would just be a tailored report, so a few $1,000. But I'll double check that and report back to you, but it's not expensive.
Councillor
So-
Peterson?
So just in closing, I just want to recap, it's $57,000 all in per year for this council, which is pretty significant. And, but because these will be published, it will be up to the councillors to be able to choose whether or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. So again, I call the question. We're voting on that council approved policy 1806, council remuneration policy, as presented with amendments from Councillor Montgomery. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried, 5-1. Our next item on the agenda is request for decision, Strathmore Motor Products Sports Centre, field turf options. And Tracy Simpson, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this evening we're coming back to discuss the turf options and sport flooring options for the Strathmore Motor Products Sports Centre. I do apologize, we put a new report in front of you just a little while ago, and we kind of finalized this idea today. So I'll just walk you through it for those of you who may not have time to fully read it. So after last week's discussion with council, we kind of went back to the drawing board to come up with a new solution that maybe met a few more needs in the community while still making the facility versatile. So the model that we're presenting is what we're calling a sponsorship or partnership model. And we feel that it meets as many community needs as the facility can handle, and it makes it a true multi-use facility. So what we're proposing is that on the large playing surface, which is in the northeast corner of the building, so where the box lacrosse has been proposed, is we propose 3 pieces of equipment. We put down sport flooring, which is similar to the gymnasium. This flooring is used in lots of rec centers for lacrosse, soccer, also ball sports that we use in the gymnasium. It gives the space real flexibility. We can drill holes and put up nets for badminton, volleyball, pickleball, all of those fun gymnasium sports. Gives us a lot of ability to host really large tournaments or training camps for those ball sports. Something that our school partners have really expressed an interest in. This really helps us fill those kind of shoulder seasons between soccer and lacrosse, especially focusing on some summer times. It gives that space a lot of versatility. The second thing we would install is a removable board product. And what it is a system that is still bolted to the floor, so it is adequate for lacrosse or any contact sports that use the boards as part of their game. It is removable in the sense that it can be taken out. It is labor intensive to take out, so it's not something you would do on a regular basis, but season to season, it's definitely doable. It would be something similar to, but obviously not the same caliber as they have at major hockey facilities like the Saddle Dome, where they use those spaces that are really flexible. And then we would purchase a removable turf product, something that is geared towards soccer to meet their needs. That would be non-adhesive, that would lay over top of the sport flooring, and the boards would be removed to meet their needs. So this option is quite different from the last option we put in front of council, but we do feel like it's really versatile and flexible. It does come with some risks, obviously, as any good option does. One of the big challenges with removable products, both the boards and the turf, is their life expectancy just isn't as long. There's a lot more wear and tear on them for the installation and demobilization of these products. So a product that, once installed, may last 10 to 15 years. This one may be looking at a 7 to 10 year lifespan, depending on how many times it's moved and used and how well it's handled. This option definitely comes with a higher price point as well. We didn't have time to get some solid numbers, but our estimate is in that 500 plus range for all three products. And that would include altering materials, installation, and storage. Though that is a really rough estimate, it is not something we've gotten quotes for on everything at this point. So this model comes with a funding proposal, and in quick discussion with soccer and lacrosse today, is something that they're open to discussing. And what we're proposing is, we kind of break it down that the town would fund half of this project. The other half would come from both a corporate sponsor and our users. So a quarter of the cost, right around $50,000 per user group. They would fund that and become a sponsor of this facility. They would be able to pay that back over a time period that we negotiate with them. Gives them a lot more sustainability in their operating of their societies, to pay smaller amounts over multiple years as opposed to a lump sum. And then the other quarter, we would continue to solicit a corporate sponsorship for this facility to pay over the tenure that we're using as a corporate sponsorship model. The town would be required, or we would be asking the town to fund upfront the costs of this model, because we want the facility operational as early as possible. The town would front the costs, and then it would be paid back over the years of the sponsorships from both user groups and the corporate sponsor. The other piece that we're recommending is that the money we receive from our user groups be put into an equipment reserve, specifically for this field that they funded. So the 100K over the 5-6 years. Sorry, exactly how I use my hands. Would be put in a reserve specifically for this facility. So in 10 to 15 years, when we need to replace boards or turf or the sport flooring after 25 years, it's pulled from that reserve, trying to create some sustainability and some long-term financial management for this product specifically. We do have some other options to save costs. First option is we could forego the sport flooring. That would give lacrosse the option to play on turf, but still in a boarded system. That way, it's going to save us some upfront costs. It does make it less flexible. The sport flooring gives us a lot of versatility with other sports, but it's definitely an option if we want to be a little more frugal. The other option is soccer has a used product that could be used for the next year or 18 months to give us time to fundraise, or for them to fundraise and us to fund a new turf product. Used turf definitely comes with some risks. It doesn't come with a warranty, which always opens us up to any ongoing operating issues that we can unforesee. New products obviously come with warranty that gives us a lot of security in those first 3 years of the facility being used. So before we jump to questions, just talk quick next steps. If council likes this idea or a version of this idea, our next steps would be to start negotiating with our user groups to come up with a funding agreement that meets their needs and their payment model that they think is feasible for them. We want to go in with a bit of flexibility in terms of the term period. We don't want them to feel financially strapped by their commitment, but we want to make sure that they are contributing their fair share. So 4, 5, 6 years, whatever kind of meets their needs. The other piece is we'd actually go and get some hard numbers for these materials and come back to council on December 5th with an ask for additional funding. Currently, the boards and the sport flooring are outside the scope of this project and will require more funding. So we'll continue questions at this time. I know the process here as well. And they have talked to their board, I believe, yesterday, and are on board with a commitment of $50,000 over 5 years, as well as a commitment to some other equipment in the facility, like a scoreboard or nets, to help us offset some of those costs. So they're very excited to start fundraising.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson. And I see that past President Scott Fargy and current President Jonathan Peters are here. If you have anything that you would like to add to Tracy's presentation, we'll
No.
take questions.
No.
No? Okay. So we will talk after. Sorry about that. But I do understand that you were consulted in this process, and thank you for coming today.
Not this one. This is new.
This is new?
This is new to everybody.
Okay.
Surprise.
They haven't seen this. Okay.
They just got like everybody else. It was a quick turnaround from last week.
Thank you. And Tracy, I realize that you've been sick too, so that's played a little bit of a part in that. I have just a quick question. What is the cost on the sport flooring?
Don't know.
I don't know that cost, that's the one cost that we're unknown. I estimated based on the cost of the gymnasiums, and it's gonna be in that 200+ range, but I do not know a firm cost on that.
Thank you.
Never looked at it.
Counselor Peterson? No, it was you first? See, I look and it's weird sitting here, I tell you. I know exactly what Pat's talking about now. So Counselor Corbeil,
Actually, it was me, but.
it was you?
Yep, go ahead.
Counselor Sobel, please.
It doesn't really matter. I think we're all going to cover the same things anyway. First of all, I just want to acknowledge Lacrosse's interest in being present today and their interest in supporting this. I think that's a really amazing decision that your board made, and it's well appreciated. Tracy, here's the questions I have. First of all, can you tell me what the condition of the Chestermere and Strathmore soccer turf is? Have you had a look at it?
No, I have not.
Somebody?
We're planning to go on Friday to take a look, so we'll have a better idea
All right.
very shortly. They have been using it for the time that it's been in storage, and they say it's in playable condition.
So I really like the idea of the sport flooring. I think the more versatility we bring to the unit is the areas is great, and this is going to, there's a focus here of attracting different groups with this kind of flooring. So of that, I think that's just brilliant. The removable boards is something that I do question. Certainly, permanent boards would be cheaper than removable boards when they both in cost in cost of the item and also in regards to manpower hours.
Absolutely, permanent boards are much cheaper.
So, with the understanding that soccer can use boards, would prefer maybe perhaps not, and I don't know if you've had this discussion with soccer, but if they're amenable to having the boards in there, would we consider permanent boards?
It's a great question, Councillor Sobel. We're definitely open to that. I know soccer is really willing to be flexible and they'll play within the boards. We're proposing the removable product for two reasons. One, it is a trend in their sport to go away from it. I know it's gonna take time to get there, but eventually they are gonna be going to non-boarded soccer. The other is it gives us a lot more flexibility for non-sport events like trade shows. The boards, even though the rink is, or the playing surface is really large, boards definitely limit our ability to use that space, and so the removable product gives us some flexibility for ceremonies, trade shows, etc.
Right. And lastly, what is your ideas for the small field if this was to go ahead?
We don't have any ideas right now. We have lots of ideas right now, but we're not set on an idea. One of the challenges is the concrete net area was the last piece poured. So
Yes.
It's not ready.
Mhm.
So that gives us some time to see how the facility is used and come up with a solution that best meets our needs.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Counselor Sobel. I have Counselor Cox next.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question goes to the sport flooring, and you've somewhat touched on it, but not completely. Does this sport flooring pose a problem for trade shows, more activity that is going to scratch, wreck?
No, it doesn't.
Do we have to then invest in more product to cover that sport flooring if we're going to go down that road?
Our plan is to invest in a tarp for our current gymnasium, which can be multi-use for both of them to cover if needed. But it's a pretty durable product, and we could put trade shows on it.
We could.
Just like any school gymnasium that has this kind of problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Corbeil?
Donovan James the first.
Were you first, Mr. Thackeray?
Don't know. It
Okay,
was-
it doesn't matter.
Go
I thought,
ahead.
Go ahead.
thank you,
Yeah,
Worship.
please.
I thought you might have been in regards
I
to
don't know.
her. Quick question for you. Would this be available for this year's season?
That I can't answer right now because it's a new idea. We're still talking to our vendors, so it would be vendor dependent. Our goal would be to get it ready for early January, but I don't want to confirm that just because we haven't got confirmation.
I was just making sure that's kind of where we're going. Okay. I know soccer would like the removable boards because they are a safety issue. Oh, they crash into them. That's just one thing that Mark Shorn had mentioned when I was talking to him. I do like the versatility of the removable boards. My question is, are you looking for a motion? Because I don't really see when. I don't know if we're there for a motion. I like the way, and I like the fact that we are actually trying to go and accompany or accommodate all sports in this. So I really thank you for this option. But yeah, I'm just, with so many up in the airs, like we haven't really sat down. I know you sat down with lacrosse or soccer. I don't think you've met with lacrosse yet because you were sick. Like sorry, which direction are you looking for?
So tonight we're going to be asking for council to approve this model as a go forward, and that would give us direction to start taking those actions, and we can come back on December 5th with hopefully commitments or a commitment to proceed with agreements with our two user groups and some more costs.
I think that's all I have right now. Just give me 2 seconds. I haven't gone.
I can totally come back to you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions just along Councillor Cox's way of thinking. Is the sport flooring glued down?
Sport flooring is an adhesion.
Yeah, it's an adhesion.
Permanently
It has an adhesion.
permanently glued to the floor.
Yeah.
Okay. And are other sports centers going to this type of surface because it's spongier and nicer to play on as opposed to concrete? Or could you go over why do you want to cover that one more time, please?
For sure. So it depends on the facility. I wouldn't say that everyone's funding this way. The benefit of it is it gives great versatility to the space. So ball sports like basketball, volleyball, pickleball, badminton can be played on that surface. You paint the lines, you drill the holes, and it creates multi-purpose. High River is a great example of that. That's the sport farm they put down in their field house with the boards for lacrosse, soccer, and others. True field houses in the city centers go with turf products because they're only designed for soccer and lacrosse. We want to be as multi-use as possible, and that's why we're recommending this product.
And I have heard that that flooring, that cement that we put down is a 6-inch slab and can accommodate tractors. So can the sport flooring also hold the load of a tractor?
A tractor?
I know. Well, if we were to do
Yeah,
an
I can
auto
speak
show
to it.
or a
I can
RV show. Thank you, James.
So if I may, depending on the type of event, you may or may not put material down on the floor, depending on what's on the floor. What's critical is that the floor is capable of taking the weight without cracking it. And so that's why it's designed the way it is, so it can take the weight of something large, whatever that thing is. Sure. So the thinking of this type of rubberized floor is you can put stuff on top, and as Tracy said, it makes it more versatile, and then you can remove it. And so, but they're both safe surfaces to play on, regardless of the sport. The one proviso, and it's it depends on what right answer you're looking for with regard to boards. If the better boards are clear boards, whether removable or not, But the flip side is there's more maintenance because you have to keep it clean, because regardless of what sport's playing, it marks it up, and you have to do a lot of maintenance on it. But that said, the lesson learned that I would share is the more flexibility we can put into our model, the better off we are. And that means we need more options for play surfaces and to accommodate as many groups as we can to program the play. So we feel that this is a good model. And if, as Tracy said, we'll come back to you with some numbers in December. But we're certainly order the magnitude is we're in that $500,000 order of magnitude. Probably it could be a little higher. We'll be surprised if it's a little higher. But I think for the long run, this is a long play. This is a long-term investment. It really, I just like to thank Jonathan again for meeting with me on Monday, and it was really good. And yeah, this really helped us spawn some ideas. So Tracy and I sat down this afternoon and tried to come up with something, and she did a great job. Thank you, Tracy, for putting some edges around this. So.
I wish you could
Thank
tell
you.
me that it would be safer for players, that we would see less injuries if we were to install this floor, because I played on cement, and it's hard to play lacrosse on cement. There are a lot of injuries, so I'm definitely for this. If it can accommodate more, and
this
still meet soccer and lacrosse's demands as well, I think that you've really gone over and above to accommodate all these pieces. So thank you, Tracy. Are there any other comments? Councillor Corbeil?
Quick comment, and then I can make a motion, actually.
Yes, please.
Even if it is in the 500, like even if we could use their turf that they have, even if it saves us, 2 years or a year and a half, at least it's money that we don't have to spend now. I think any use that we can get out of it, if it's in decent shape, which realistically, if it's soccer going to be using it and they're the one donating it, I can't see it being crappy, right? Like, because they're going to be playing on it. I move that council support option number 3 as presented for the fields at the Strathmore Motorsports Product Center, whatever. Holy, Strathmore Motor Product Sports Center.
We don't want to offend our sponsors.
Oh, I know.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. The next item on the agenda is 7.3, request for decision, FCSS Grant Program Policy number 5102 and procedure number 5102-1 on page 30 of your agenda package. Tracy, are you going to be speaking to that?
I can.
Thank you.
Lynn Bernanke couldn't be here tonight, so I'm gonna present on her behalf. So go easy on me. So this evening, we're presenting policy 5102. It's our grants program policy. This is, while it's a new policy for FCSS, it is not a new program for FCSS. As you know, we've been granting out money for the past 6 years with very little edges in a formal setting. And so the policy, what it's doing is it's formalizing our existing practice, as well as expanding it to allow for multi-year funding. So right now what we do is we only do annual funding with one organization on a multi-year funding kind of pilot project. It's going really well. We're really happy with the reporting we're getting back from them and how they're utilizing our funds. We're saving a lot of administrative time on both ends of the partnership. And so everyone seems to be really happy with the model, and so that's what we're presenting today. So the multi-year funding model will be eligible to community groups who have received 3 years previous funding from FCSS and who are in good standing, so that they're up to date on their reporting, they provide us with their outcome measurements, and they have no outstanding issues in terms of our partnership. The program formalizes our timeline for our grants, so associations and organizations in town can rely on a consistency of when the grants come out every year and when they'll be awarded. It helps with their planning and their budgeting. There's a couple exceptions or alterations, I guess, to the policy. One of them is there's a contingency built into both annual and multi-year funding that in the event that Government of Alberta funding, which as you know is what funds our grant program, is ever altered in any way, it gives the town the right to alter the funding agreements that we have in place with limited notice. We don't foresee that happening in the near future, but you can never guarantee it, as we only get annual contracts with the government. The other thing is that it allows for us to address urgent needs in the community. If there's a crisis or an emergent issue that we feel needs to be addressed right away, we can divert grant funding to that area of need with support from council by resolution. So the policy in front of you states our two grant streams, and I'm going to take any questions.
Who was first? Councilor Montgomery, were you first?
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. What are some examples of the groups or programs that would qualify for the 3-year grant program?
That's a great question. So currently, right now, we have a 3-year model with the Growing Families Society, and they get $15,000 every year for 3 years to fund multiple programs within their kind of portfolio. They fund programs for
Bridging the Gap.
adults. So Bridging the Gap is one, which is a senior volunteer initiative. They fund a program that helps
5 for Life.
or young adults who are pregnant, kind of transition into that motherhood lifestyle.
Growing opportunity.
Any program that we fund on a regular basis, so counseling services that we offer in partnership with the school. Put me on the spot, I don't remember all the companies or organizations.
No, that's good. I just wanted some examples for the public. So.
Apparently.
Apparently, thank you, and the Pregnancy Care Center is another one.
Okay. And like I see that the report referred to, so the policy, I believe it was, spoke about possible emerging social issues. What does that refer to?
Sometimes there's a crisis or an event in your community that creates a social issue that needs to be addressed really quickly. Usually they're worst case scenario issues. I don't want to go really dark, but something like a school shooting that requires crisis management, or an epidemic of some kind with youth or seniors. Those are things that aren't a trend in your community necessarily all the time, but is a short-term issue that we need to address.
Okay, thank you. And one final question is, what is the current size of the grant budget?
So this year's grant budget was $30,000. We spent that for 2018, and we'll be discussing the budget for 2019 with council during the budget workshop.
The FCSS budget is bigger than that. This is just the government grant portion. Yeah.
But is that the total size of the FCSS grant budget as far as what FCSS grants out?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now, just to clarify, when you're saying FCSS grant, it's still taxpayer money that is going from the town to FCSS that you are granting to these organizations, right? We're not receiving this money from the provincial government.
The whole FCSS budget is funded roughly 60% by the federal, or the
Provincial.
Provincial.
provincial government, and then 40% by taxpayers.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Peterson?
No, it was Councillor Cox.
Sorry, could I just make one clarification?
Yes, please.
Even though it is still funded partially by tax dollars, all grants must meet the requirements of the FCSS funding and how those dollars are spent.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Councillor Cox?
Your worship, I'm ready to make the motion.
Will that be okay, Councillor Peterson?
Yeah, the question can come after. No
Thank you.
problem.
Councillor Cox?
Thank you, your worship. I move the council adopt the FCSS grant program policy number 5102 as presented.
Thank you for the motion, Councillor Cox. Discussion? Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So relevant to the motion, Your Worship, and through the chair, on page 34, under 5.3, which talks about ineligibility, this is always, and I know that this is from the provincial FCSS guidelines. I know that this is not your policy and that you are compelled to put it in here. But I have to tell you that this drives me crazy, and this is why. 5.3 under ineligibility is in direct conflict with 5.11 and 5.12. It is also in direct conflict with number 1, Appendix A on page 39 of the procedure bylaw. I don't know if there's anything that can be done with this, but in the past, when I was a member of FCSS, of the board, when we were with the county wheatland, And in subsequent years, when I was just engaged as an educator in community and sometimes the recipient and sometimes not of FCSS dollars, this was hugely problematic because it created a smoke and mirrors environment that allowed whoever was in the position of disseminating the grants to make unqualified decisions relative to very, very unclear process. In fact, process that was in direct conflict within the document itself. I don't know if there's any way we can fix this through, and possibly through the procedural bylaw. But this is untenable, and it is a provincial problem, I recognize that, but in the past, it has become our problem. And thank goodness in our current administration and under your watch, this has improved enormously, and I'm extremely grateful for it. But looking into the future, it's something we have to address.
Thank you, that's a really great point. We've talked about this a lot, actually, and one of the tools that we have at our disposal is the outcome measure reports that we send to the province.
Yes, and the matrix that you have.
And the matrix, and so when we provide really tangible, detail-oriented outcome measures from all of the programs that we fund as well as our internal programs, it shows the province where the needs are in the community, and that's our mechanism for change at the provincial level. You're right, these are requirements set out by the FCSS Act, and the biggest challenge with the FCSS Act in general is there's lots of gray, and so it creates a lot of mirrors and conflict. The other tool that we're hoping to utilize is we're revamping right now our CIF funding model.
Yes.
And trying to make it more comprehensive and open, and you'll see that in front of you in the near future, and we're hoping to address some of these gaps through that funding model, so that people in the community have opportunities to reach out where there's need, but just through different streams.
I have one suggested, possibly friendly amendment as well on page 37 under 3.2.2. And in the 6 notations under 3.2.2, I know that it could be assumed, but it isn't clear. And one of the evaluation criteria that I know that Strathmore FCSS abides by is early intervention. And it is consistent, but I don't see it here in and of itself, and it isn't necessarily spelled out within the Act and the regulations. So I'm wondering if Councillor Cox would consider a friendly amendment to add early intervention practice. And if you think that that's worthwhile,
I actually think that's a really good point. Early intervention is definitely one of our top priorities, and so we would be.
it's reflected in everything you do, so. The final thing I have, Your Worship, is with regards to policy exceptions in 6.0. This small amount of money does an extraordinary amount of good. I was privileged to hear Councillor Sobel address the Growing Opportunities group the other day to recognize one of their long-term directors and celebrate the enormous amount of 22 years of success. Very, very much connected to support from the community and from programs like yours. However, in the eventuality of 6.0 and huge shifts, I'm wondering, and it doesn't have to happen in this document, but it would be really good in the dissemination of the dollars if they understood, according to Policy 6, that if there was a reduction in provincial benefit, that they would be reduced by the percentage amount consistent with the overall budget amount, just so that they had certainty.
We never went into that much detail in terms of what would happen if GOA funding was altered in any way, and we're definitely open to implementing that if that's what council wants to see as a strong.
I don't want to see it in here, I just don't think, but I just think for the certainty for them moving forward, it's going to be really critical, because we've not seen huge increases in FCSS, small increases recently, but what we have seen over 2 decades, significant decreases. And so I know that they worry a lot about that, but I thank you for the work, and I'm very supportive, thank you.
Councillor Sobel?
Thank you. So I guess my comment would be in regards to Councillor Peterson's comments regarding 5.3, and as I'm sure you're aware, that this was identified as issues when I was on the board of FCSS a lot of years ago. And I appreciate it's a provincial thing. And I don't want to get into a separate motion here because there is a motion on the floor, but is there some consideration for us as a council identifying specifically this issue to the minister?
That's a good, you know what, that's a good place to go. Absolutely.
I know Tracy will be, and her crew will be identifying this too, but, you know, and you know what? We may even want to
On the
consider
floor of
this as an
AUMA.
AUMA.
I agree with you. That's a wonderful idea.
So thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Cox, are you agreeable to those friendly amendments?
Of course.
And Ms. Sawatsky, do you need us to repeat what the friendly amendments are?
Just the G. Adding a. Sorry, Your Worship. 3.2.
Thank you. So just a quick note, I believe that amendment was made to a procedure, and that procedure is actually approved by the CAO. The policy itself is approved by council, but the procedure by the CAO, so we don't need that amendment in the resolution.
Okay. You've all heard the motion then? That council adopt the FCSS grant program policy number 5102 as presented. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. We now go on to committee reports. 8.1, reports from committees on which councillors sit. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I'd just like to report very, very quickly on a request from the Wheatland Housing Management Body for our mayor and our CAO to attend their January meeting. They've indicated that is a possibility. Am I correct, Mr. Thackeray?
May I answer through the chair? Yes, myself. I'm presumably Mayor Pat Fuel, and I've also asked Doug Legore to attend the meeting in January.
And the only other thing I have to report prior to the minutes being ratified and coming to this council is that Councillor Jason Wilson of the County Wheatland is now the second representative for the County Wheatland. Amber Link was the previous and is now Reeve. The organizational meeting has maintained relatively the same structure. Councillor Cox and I both have distinct duties there, and Councillor Glenn Reeve is, Glenn Kester is still the chair. Thank you.
Mr. Thackeray, if it would be appropriate for me to attend that meeting as deputy mayor, I'd like to be included, please. In January, yes, thank you. Any other reports from councillors? Thank you. Then we'll just move to items directly related to council. Oh, let's move to accept Councillor Peterson's report for information.
I move the council accept the reports for information.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. We're now going on to 9.1, Notice of Motion, Bylaw 18-21, Enforcement Resource Tracking.
I'll speak to that, Your Worship. In light of the fact that the town has passed bylaw 18-21, which prescribes smoking of tobacco in all public places, practically. And whereas the town of Strathmore expends resources not limited to labor and other material resources to enforce the prohibition of public smoking of tobacco through bylaw 18-21, and just as a warning, I've added a few words to this, so it should read pretty much the same. But so I will move that council direct administration to track all costs and resources directed towards the research, creation, management, and enforcement of bylaw 18-21, whether direct or indirect, retroactive to the initiation of the bylaw, and provide a semi-annual report to council detailing the aforementioned and any other related expenditure of resources, as well as any revenues generated as a direct result of this bylaw. So essentially, I wanted to see how much it costs and how much we get from it, so.
And Councillor Montgomery, would you like to speak any further on that motion?
No, if you have any questions, though, I'm happy to answer them.
Councillors, are there any questions on that motion? Councillor Corbeil?
I do, just that.
Oh, yes, Ms. Sawatsky?
Your worship, just one question from administration. What meeting would Councillor Montgomery like this motion to be considered at?
The next council meeting is fine.
Do we need to include that in the motion?
It's not.
Your worship, this is not a motion, it's a notice of motion.
Thank you.
So the notice is for the next council meeting.
All right, thank you very much. So we do not need to vote on that then. Thank you very much.
I do have a quick question.
Discussion? Yes.
Just a quick question, actually. Are you wanting to do this like for a year? Are you wanting to do this indefinitely, or?
I think that probably 2 years at the most should be fine. I just want to get an idea of what it costs to create a bylaw, what it costs for the town to create a bylaw, and then to.
Oh, you can't discuss it, sorry. She asked, so I didn't know. All right.
I did say, let's discuss it, that's
Yeah.
true.
Okay, sorry.
I wasn't supposed to.
All right, well.
We
then-
don't discuss the motion until it's on the floor. Thank you. So we will discuss it next meeting. Hold your questions.
You just have to look at
How dare you?
the naughty face.
Yes, the naughty face, I missed it. Thank you very much. We'll just move on. Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. We are now moving on to number 10 bylaws, 10.1. Bylaw number 18-24 to amend fees bylaw number 12-21, business license fees, page 45 of your agenda package. And we have Justin coming up. Thank you, Justin.
Good evening. Great. Good evening, Council. Before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge Kathy Jones, who is sitting on a beach somewhere sipping a margarita, but she did some great work on this file and did a lot of research and was the author. So I just wanted to give her some kudos before I begin. So this bylaw recommends to amend the current fees bylaw number 1321, by increasing the business license fees for businesses located within the town as well as outside the town but are operating within the boundary. The bylaw will implement an annual increase of 15% for the business license fees described above, beginning January 2019 to December 2023. So the key intent of this bylaw change is to increase revenues to the town to help fund the future economic development activities which are critical to the town's growth and some of the work we're doing with the MDP, as we talked about last week, as well as to remain competitive and receive revenues that are comparable in the Calgary regional area. We do provide a similar service to many businesses as well as a similar market segment. So if you're a Subway, for example, if you sell a sub here or in Calgary or in Chestermere, all those places, you're basically receiving similar revenue in a similar market and the services that are being received. And really some of the economic development activities will also help these businesses directly. Some of the history for you, the last time the business license bylaw was amended was in 2010. This was an increase of $75 to $100 for businesses located within the town. This was approximately a 33% increase, and for the businesses located outside the town, it was from $150 to $200, and again, this was approximately a 33% increase. This is a summary of the revenues that we are currently generating from business license fees from 2013 to 2018 to date, October. And based upon the licenses in 2017, we had about 57% of the businesses were within the town and 43% outside the town. So just some of the research we undertook in terms of analyzing fees and really how different areas look at them, there's many different ways. You could really look at the type of business, the size, the number of employees, full and part-time, as well as where they're actually located in terms of the land use district. We concluded that the above indicators just involve far too many variables, which start to create inconsistencies and also subjectivity in terms of how each business is analyzed. So you could have a business that have, 20 part-time employees or 2 full-time, the size in terms of storage and just where the business is actually occurring. So again, it just starts to create just a lot of work for the staff and to be able to really assess what the cost per business would be. So what we've done is chosen to align ourselves with similar sized towns and who look at just the type of business as the way that the fees would be analyzed, just in terms of all the businesses would fall under the same category. So as you know, in 2019, Council recently approved funding for an economic development officer. And just some of the tasks that we're considering the officer would be involved in is looking at developing plans, establishing support bodies, tourism and marketing, implementation initiatives that will help to attract new businesses, working with local businesses, as well as potential funding for some private projects that could come up that would encourage economic growth in Strathmore. So what we're looking to do is tie some of these business license fee increases to the many new exciting initiatives that would be planned through this new role. And through research, we did find that the other towns as well are funding their economic development work through fees that go into the general revenue. So just really the more fees that are coming in, the more would be available within the revenue to be able to support the above activities. So this is just some analysis that we did. So I said we've picked the communities of High River, Cochrane, and Chestermere as those to compare with. Currently, the town is charging $100 for businesses that are in the town. And really what we did was we took a 5-year revenue as to if really nothing changed, what would the town's average revenue be compared to the other towns. So as you can see, over a 5-year period, if we compared Strathmore with High River, Cochrane, and also Chestermere, taking an average of $717 that those three would be receiving, we're about 70% of the revenue that would be received compared to those towns. So again, going back to just the point that we're making, that we're a similar size municipality, we offer similar services, we offer a similar market segment as where these businesses would be operating. 70% for us was quite low, and we'd like to be more competitive. So we looked at 3 options in terms of how we would increase those fees. We acknowledged we didn't want to have a large fee overnight, so we are recommending a 5-year gradual increase. So we looked at a 10%, 15%, and 20% option, and what it would get to us in those 5 years. So we are recommending option number 2, which is a 15% annual increase, which would get us to about 108% of the current average. Notwithstanding, part of the research that Ms. Jones did was that the other municipalities are also looking at increasing fees. So we're assuming that those fees that they'll be charging will stay the same in this calculation, but in all likelihood, those fees will also be increasing from the other municipalities. Again, a similar analysis chart for out-of-town business fee revenue. So we're currently charging $200. The other High River, Cochrane, and also Chestermere are $300, $320 300. So again, taking a 5-year revenue stream and then the average income that those three would be receiving, we're at about 65% of the revenue that we would be receiving. So again, we feel that is low. We'd like to be more competitive and receive higher revenues. So again, we looked at the three options, 10, 15, and 20%. We wanted to be consistent in terms of the increases we would be charging for in-town businesses as well as out of town. So we're sticking with the 15% recommendation, which would get us bang on line. It's about 101% as to the 5-year. But again, just taking into account, as I said, we feel those other municipalities will also be raising their rates over the next 5 years. This calculation is based upon their current fees. So in summary, we recommend that council give thought to this business license fee increase, which will help to fund the economic development and future tourism programs. We're currently receiving about $140,000. If this bylaw would be approved over the next 5 years, we're estimating that if you look at a 15% increase of the revenue every 5 years, we'll go up to about $280,000. So over the next 5 years, with this gradual increase of 15% annually, the town could actually double the amount of revenue that would be received to help fund the economic development initiatives. And this gradual increase, as I mentioned, will bring the town more in line with the 5-year average revenues of other similar towns, and notwithstanding, they are most likely going to be raising their fees in that 5-year period anyway. So there are recommendations that council approve this bylaw and give us second and third reading.
Thank you
for
very
your time.
much.
Thank you.
We have time for questions. Councillor Sobel, you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a few questions, Justin. Thank you for
Yeah.
your presentation, and thank you
Welcome.
to Kathy for sitting on a beach while you're doing all the hard work, and for all of her work. You've used the word competitiveness a lot in the presentation, and I'm trying to get my head around why raising these rates to what other communities have for business licenses, it makes us competitive.
Through the chair, sorry if that's not coming across clearly. In our mind, I guess being competitive is that we want to make sure that the revenues we are receiving as a town is competitive and equal and
Similar to.
similar and consistent with other municipalities our size for a very similar service and market segment that they are operating in.
Gotcha.
Hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Because when I think of competitiveness, I think the lower price we have makes her more competitive. That's just my personal
So I
thought,
guess
but
it's from a town
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
community to
Sure,
community.
yeah.
So I note that our present license fee revenue is currently $140,000 minus $2,600 that goes to Chamber of Commerce. Where does that money go?
The 2,600 or?
No,
what's
the
total?
137,400.
Through the chair, I believe it goes into general revenue. Happy for Mr. Thackeray and Mr. Roycroft to jump in, but that's what I've been advised, that it goes into the
Under discussion.
general revenue at this moment in time.
Somebody
It's
clarify
right
that?
here, it's right here, top of the page.
Is that confirmed, somebody?
Yeah, Your Worship, Your Worship, it does just go into general revenue. The town doesn't yet sort of stratify that into different reserves or cost centers yet.
Should, I guess my question is, should that money not be going towards the exact purpose of this raise, is tourism and EDO opportunities? Would that not make sense?
If I may, through the chair.
Mr. Thackeray, thank you.
I guess the intention is for us is to build, for your consideration, is to build a bucket of money where we can allocate money towards economic development and tourism. And it's by no means the only place to do it, but with the current proposal, we wanted to just put an idea to council, which is consistent with the financial strategy, and to see if this is of interest to you as a way to create some sustainable and multi-year funding for these types of initiatives. Right now, it's less tight, and we wanted to create a direct link to something we believe is valuable for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Justin, I know there's regulations that will, policies that'll be adhere to this new policy if it's passed, or new bylaw that's passed, pardon me. Would food trucks, for instance, be under the same category as, in the same responsibility for these business license fees as directed?
Through the chair, mostly the food trucks, I believe, that are coming to Strathmore are operating on a 1 to 2 or 3 day basis.
Right.
So we have a different fee for that. This would be for full-time businesses that are either in town or out of town.
So that wouldn't change?
No,
The price-
exactly.
The present price for a food
Yes.
truck, and I presume, and how about home-based business? Are you considering any changes,
yes,
or does that follow in here?
Yes, that would be a full-time in-town business.
And that's, I'm not sure if you're aware of, Kathy's aware, that's different than a lot of communities. Home-based licenses are normally considerably less than a full-time.
Through the chair,
basis,
we
but
can
it was a
certainly
decision made.
look into that. If council feels appropriate to charge less or not include a raise for home-based businesses, we can certainly implement that.
My next question, I believe administration, I suppose this question is directed to administration. I believe we were looking at a hotel tourism levy that would help fund economic development. My concern is
The one that Wild Rose, or that Canadian Badlands?
Canadian Badlands is looking at. Now, that would have if that was to go through, that would have a real influence on the money that we spend towards an EDO. I mean, that's the whole purpose of that tourism levy, is to sponsor an EDO and tourism efforts. So I'm just wondering if this may be a little premature until we get that settled.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Probably. Yeah, Your Worship, with regards to that, the money that would be raised from that sort of levy really has to be directed towards DMO funding, because it comes under the rubric of this provincial legislation that allows us to put this extra charge on it. There's a lot more restrictions, so we couldn't use it to hire an EDO to do sort of general town economic development. It would have to be through a DMO to be spent on tourism stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends up, we couldn't sort of dedicate that money to a lot of the dev activities we want. It would have to be pure tourism, whereas own funds like this, we can allocate as sort of council sees fit.
Sure, but it's very specific here that that's where some of this money is going.
Your Worship, that's correct. Right now, we're kind of blending ECDev and tourism in terms of
Yeah.
the role the individual will play.
Yeah, I'm not ready to support this. Anyway, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you very much, Justin, and Kathy as well. So my first question is, do you have any idea, and pardon me if you mentioned it, but how many non-local licenses there were?
Yes, I believe it was 47%.
Okay.
43% outside the town.
Okay.
Out of, this was based upon 2017 stats.
Okay. And as you guys were kind of constructing this, did you guys discuss, like, at what price point you felt there would be kind of let's say, a decline in the number of businesses that would, still come out and do business here, but wouldn't bother getting a license?
Through the chair, we honestly didn't go down that road too much. I think what we did look at was just this chart here. So, we did look at what year or what price point, based upon current fees from other municipalities, we would go over.
Yeah.
So in this chart, if you look at 2022, based upon current fees, we would now be charging more than Cochrane, High River, and also Chestermere. But again, a lot of conversations Kathy had was many municipalities are looking at their fees currently.
Mm-hmm.
I would be extremely surprised that if I was to come back here in 4 years, that their fees would be the same. So
Mhm.
that's why part of our recommendation was under the assumption, but a strong assumption based upon conversations with them, that those fees would be increasing. So I guess your question would be, from my side, as long as we're in line with other municipalities and we're not totally out of left field in terms of what we're charging, the attraction of out-of-town businesses would still remain strong. Strathmore does have a very strong retail draw, not just in our town, but of course sort of the surrounding area, Wheatland County, and we serve, I think, close to 32,000 people, one of the last stats I heard. So we do have a strong retail draw that are bringing in out-of-town businesses that are realizing the benefit of coming to our town. So I don't believe at this time that would be a deterrent.
I would suggest that it doesn't really matter what other communities are charging. Like if a plumber's coming from Calgary, it doesn't matter if High River's charging $1,000 and we're charging $500. They still might not get the license because they might not want to spend the $500.
Sure. Yeah.
And to Councillor Sobel's point about the home-based businesses, they were looking at increasing that, and I made the point that you might just price out a bunch of people from not, they'll still do business out of their home, but they might
Right.
not be entertaining getting a license. And I think that, it's all well and good to, I would say increase, as obviously inflation happens and things like that, and as we're providing better value to a business. But I think we need to be careful about, like in 5 years, we're going to be expecting some business to give us $400 just to come in and, take some money from our citizens. And there's a good chance, and I'd be interested, I guess, to see what the split in other communities was as far as the local to non-local businesses. I would expect, if there was no effect at all on the price of an out-of-town business license, I would expect the split to be the same as ours. But if you saw that the split was, let's say, more extreme, that would suggest that that does have an effect. So I think I don't know if I can necessarily support the 15% per year for 5 years. I do support increasing it, but I don't think I would necessarily go with that model necessarily.
Mr. Thackeray?
If I may, through the chair, this is for the reason why we put it for council for consideration. If council is amenable, and it sounds like there's a lot of questions, I'm wondering whether council would like to refer this to committee of the whole for some more discussion and to get more feedback on it. I think it would be a healthy option if you wish to consider that. Thank you.
I personally would really like that suggestion. I have additional questions. I know Councillor Peterson, Councillor Corbeil still do as well. So if we could please postpone this item to Committee of the Whole. Ms. Sawatsky,
Need a motion?
would that be okay with the councillors, or do you still have things that you'd like to say?
It might be useful, Your Worship, before the Committee of the Whole, if we had questions that we forwarded them. That's the only thing I would say.
Thank you. Do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
Councillor Corbeil?
I move we've referred this to the next committee of the whole, which is, do I have to say? December 12th?
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. And that was very prudent. Thank you for keeping us on track, Mr. Thackeray, and following the rules that we're learning to make better meetings. We now are going to go down to, I lost my place. Are we 10.2?
9.2.
9.2? 9.2 has been canceled. So,
It must be 10. No, it's 10.2. But it says 9.2 on the thing. Yes.
okay, bylaw number 18-26, 10.2, to amend council procedural bylaw number 16-18 on page 56, and who will be speaking to that?
Thank you, Your Worship, I will be.
Thank you.
Your Worship, at the November 14th Committee of the Whole meeting, administration brought forward amendments to their procedural bylaw, specifically in regard to council's committees. Council reviewed a number of changes to the terms of reference for their committees, and we are bringing this back now to council for first, second, and third reading. This is this is our next step in implementing the changes that were made to policy 1101, the committee governance and appointments policy. And after council has passed the bylaw, if they so choose to, we will be moving forward with our nominations process and then appointments to council's committees at the December 5th meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil? No, it was Peterson?
Yeah, it was her.
I was actually,
Your Worship, I would move that council give first reading to bylaw number 18-26, procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
you've all heard the motion, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Corbeil?
I move the council give second reading to bylaw number 18-26 procedure bylaw amendment bylaw.
All in favor? Discussion?
Yes, I do.
Too late. All right. So we can't have discussion on third reading? Councillor Sobel, do you have any discussion on?
I have a third reading, Your Worship.
You do? Would you please go ahead?
I would move that council give third reading to bylaw number 18-26 procedure bylaw amendment bylaw.
Your Worship,
Yeah, we need to.
council needs unanimous consent for a third read.
We need to say with
That's what I meant.
unanimous
That's
consent?
exactly what I meant, unanimous consent.
Thank you, councillors. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. I'm actually messaging our mayor, Pat Fuel. He's chiming in on this meeting and telling us what a great job we're doing.
So we
So
need third reading.
that's how I got distracted.
We need third reading.
Third and final.
I move the council give third and final reading to bylaw number 18-26 procedure bylaw amendment bylaw. No, that was unanimous consent to do it.
All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. There is no urgent business. Number 12, Councillor Peterson, you had a question between councillors and council statements.
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. I have two questions. The first question, Your Worship, relates to the cemetery bylaw. Administration indicated that they are prepared to engage in further study, conversation, discussion relevant to the cemetery bylaw in conversation with council. And the letter forwarded by Wheatland Funeral Home proprietor Glenn Van Bussel presented council with a considerable amount of information. Some of the information presented was new, presented additional points for consideration were brought forward, and additional points for consideration were brought forward that I hadn't previously thought about. My question to administration is, because of the possible pending discussion, new information, and additional considerations for thought, is it possible to amend or reconsider the fees bylaw component dealing with the Strathmore Cemetery? And the reason I ask the question is, if it comes up for consideration and conversation, and there is a, as Councillor Montgomery knows, sometimes people get old and then they perish. And so, in the interim, would it be possible to suspend that portion, to move to suspend that portion of the bylaw pending that conversation? Just so that we didn't run into that issue in our community.
Mr. Thackeray, do you have
Could I
feedback?
just clarify the question? I think you're asking, can we suspend the fees and charges specific to the cemetery for a defined period of time until such time as council wishes to render a further decision by either amending or sustaining the current bylaws? That's your question?
Absolutely, through the chair to CEO Thackeray. That is exactly it, and I, in conversations, I was told that they thought, that by our provincial group that advises council, that you had the potential to make that decision.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. Do you need that by motion?
If you
Or can you
wish.
just make, we do it as a directive to administration?
I would recommend that council does a motion to suspend that part as a policy decision. Yes, you can. You can suspend.
I'm making a different. Just one moment.
Do you need to recess? That's okay. Peter?
Sure, can we
Yep.
recess?
Could I have a motion to recess?
I would move a 2-minute recess, Your Worship.
2-minute recess. Thank you very much. All in favor? Council meeting, please.
Light on. Oh, bang my gavel? No.
Really? All right. Mr. Thackeray.
I'll let,
Thank you, Your Worship.
Ms. Sawatsky.
So, Your Worship, yes, we can suspend enforcement of the bylaw until a specific date, so that would be the recommendation that we would make, and the bylaw number is 18-26.
Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair to administration. I appreciate that. So, Your Worship, I would move that we suspend the enforcement of bylaw 18-26 pertaining to the cemetery portion of the bylaw, and to bring that back, should it be to committee of the whole?
Yes, please, Your
December
Worship.
12th.
Yes. Yes.
And
And, Your Worship, I'm really bad at reading, writing. It's actually 18-25.
18-25. Thank you very much, administration.
Is that your entire motion?
I think so.
Councillor
I think so,
Peterson?
Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Discussion on that motion? Councillor Montgomery?
So, to administration, would I be understanding it correctly that there would be no fees for the cemetery in that time?
No, Your Worship. The fees that were previously passed would be in effect.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sobel?
Thank you. Just, are you aware, Jen, if anybody has had to face the new bylaw charges?
Yes, Your Worship, we, today, yes, we have.
Did they have to pay the costs?
Yes, yes, Your Worship.
Would it be reasonable then to ask for a rescindment of that, to have their money refunded, the portion that is over?
Your Worship, we will
original?
get a hold of the individuals that we sold the plots to.
Thank you very much.
So should we make that retroactive then to some point? Okay.
All right. If there's no further discussion, All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried.
I have a second question.
Councillor Peterson?
My second question is kind of, I don't know, a bit goofy, but I have noticed recently, in taking the dog to the dog park, that there are many people who are exercising their right to smoke cannabis, only they're doing it at the dog park. And in light of the letter that we received from the veterinarians, I think this is probably going to pose a problem. And so my question is to bylaw, could we put a sign up there with a QR code that would reference the letter? Because I think it could be self-policing, but, well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Of anything, but it's just it's going to create a danger. It's going to create a danger, and, you know, I think that if we did a courtesy sign with a little QR code that led them to the letter that the veterinarians wrote and went to a lot of work to write, I don't know. It's not for answer tonight, just a query, I don't know.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief West. Councillor Cox?
I have another one that I want to direct to administration. We get a lot of comparable cities, towns. Can we have something that actually says which 3 we're going to use? Instead of just randomly picking 1, 2, 3, can we please have some kind of these are the 5 cities, towns that we're going to use for comparison, and every single person that brings us something uses those 5 towns?
Mr. Thackeray?
If I may, through the chair, it's possible to do anything you wish.
Yes. Put your lights on.
We've all got our lights on, and we all have requests.
It's too bad we lost Mayor Fuel.
The hard part is comparing, when we're taking services, is we're trying to compare like services, and sometimes that means we're comparing a different basket of benchmarked communities, because not all communities measure services in the same way. So if we took 6 communities that were the same size, the way they benchmark those services may not be the same. They may not cost account for them the same way. So it makes it more difficult to say this is an apple to apple. So not that it's just a bit tricky in our business, and there actually was an initiative in this province of some communities, Canmore was one of them, trying to find comparables, and they've reached out, I know, to a few communities, but there hasn't been a lot of communities buy into it because again, it was their intention to try and make sure that they're comparing apples to apples and size to size. So it's not always an easy thing to do.
Councillor Cox, if I could actually follow up. So something that I learned through my work on the task force, and as well, thanks to Jen's response on the cemetery issue, like you can take, like, let's say High River, for instance, which is similar to Strathmore population-wise, but due to its, like our proximity to Calgary versus, its distance from Calgary, it's not always like a comparable. So sometimes, depending on what you're measuring, you have to kind of, pick, like you have to base it on maybe distance from a major city, or you have to base it on population. So there isn't always just kind of an easy pick for these things. Thank you.
All right. So going on then, if there are no other questions between councillors and council statements, we'll go to administrative inquiries. Are there any, Ms. Sawatsky? Then I would ask for a motion to go in camera, please.
You have one.
Oh, no, please.
I move to go in camera.
Wait,
Oh,
there's
wait.
an admin inquiry.
Oh, there is an admin inquiry. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Neither did she. For good reason.
Your Worship, we do have one admin inquiry from Councillor Peterson. It reads, when will the issue regarding the CBT proposal regarding DMO designated funding come forward to Council for decision?
Your worship, because I'll probably be putting it together, I think I'd like to have the new dev person at least hired by then. So, unless there's a real decision for probably looking at January, February, just to have the new body in place first.
I stand corrected, but when Canadian Badlands toured, wasn't there something about a first of the year need to implement? And I don't know that for sure. It was a long presentation, and I'm uncertain about that, but maybe we could just check with them, because we don't, and you know, our community seems in favor of moving forward on it largely, so, you know, it would be sad to lose it if we didn't move.
Your worship, I will confirm that date. If there is a date, then I will not wait for, staff will not wait for the new person to be hired. We'll do that, at least for the quick discussion at committee of the whole in December on the 19th. If there is no my
Mr. Raycroft? I move in camera. I move.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. We're now in camera.